Council grants. A returned Peace Corps volunteer and international election observer, JoAnna currently resides in Carthage, Tunisia. Can we get a big round of applause for JoAnna? Woo!
Okay, so I am thinking about doing no microphone. Can those of you in the back hear me, or would you prefer a microphone? Use a microphone?
Try it.
Try it just in case.
Hello? Yes, microphone? Is that better? Okay. All right. I'm a hand talker, so I'm going to have to figure out how to do microphone, clicker, and engagement here. We're going to make it happen. Because actually, to be really honest with you, I have not been in front of an actual audience since 2014. I've been in all these virtual things over the last couple years, and so I'm going to be really honest and tell you I'm a little nervous. I'm leaning into it. Here we are. We're going to do this together.
We got you.
All right. Thank you. Because let's be real. Honesty. Am I right? It is uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. We avoid it. We don't want to go there. We are not honest because it is a hard place to be. And so, in the tourism industry, we have done a stellar job of avoiding it. And that has had really serious consequences. Tourism has been presented as this idyllic, beautiful, pristine activity. This is what we see when we think about tourism, when we think about travel experiences. And content creators, all of us in this room, have helped reinforce this story. And we've reinforced this by choosing certain information to share and intentionally not including some other information. Mm-hmm. We've helped reinforce this by choosing pictures that are, very palatable, that are going to get us those likes, that are going to get us those followers, that people like to see, they make us feel good. And we've chosen not to provide all the context behind these photos. We've not been very clear about our business models. And we're working in an industry that is evolving as travel content creators. And we're making money in ways that are maybe a little murky, and we're not really talking about that. So we've been presenting this as the picture of travel and the picture in the tourism industry. But honesty is the best policy. And we need to talk today about why it is more important than ever that content creators, that the tourism partners that you're working with, and that the tourism industry at large embraces. The radical transparency we need to embrace as we venture into the new era of tourism. Because there is really, really exciting and good news in this space. Tourism is going through a period of transition. All of society is going through a period of transition, right? Over the last few years, we've seen major shifts in the way that we have thought about the world we've lived in and the conversations that we've had, and that is no different in tourism. There has been a growing awareness that we need to create a space that is more sustainable, that is more equitable, that is more inclusive, that is more accessible, that is more culturally and environmentally aware. This is very exciting news in the tourism industry. We're seeing changes in how the travel experience is created, how it's packaged, and how it is being promoted to travelers. But this transition cannot fully happen without you. Content creators sit right here in the middle of this vital chain of audiences in the tourism space. travel service providers, like our accommodation owners, our destinations and DMCs, tour operators, anybody who's providing a travel product or service needs travel content creators to share that information with the general public, your readers and followers. Their story is reaching the general public through you. And going in the other direction, your readers and followers are looking to you to provide information about where they should go, what they should experience, and how they should interpret the things that they see and do when they travel. So this chain is also going back the other direction. This is all to say that our service providers and the general public need you for tourism, not only to survive, but to thrive. Now, content creators, unfortunately, have long been neglected as being recognized as this really vital link in this space. You have been overlooked as a member of the tourism industry, so to say. And what that means is that you've not necessarily been held accountable for the harm that's collectively been done to perpetuate problematic practices in this space. But I'm here to tell you that you 100% are influential. You do matter. And the decisions you make in your content creation have an impact. Travelers rely on you to know where to go and what to do. But more importantly, they rely on you to tell them how to act and behave, what kind of expectations to have, how to interact with the place and the people they meet when they travel, and also how to integrate the things that they learn while they're traveling when they return back into their quote-unquote real life. So what this means is that travel content creators like you have a responsibility to conduct your work more honestly and transparently, and you should be held accountable for it. And as a vital link in this chain of events in the tourism space, you also have a responsibility to hold your tourism partners and the rest of the tourism industry at large accountable for their actions as well. So with that in mind, I want you to walk away with two things today. I want you to have best practices and actions in hand that you can put into place with your work in order to be more transparent, to be more honest in the work that you're doing. And I also want you to have things that you can do to hold the rest of the tourism industry and your tourism partners accountable for their actions as well. Okay, so we said that the tourism story, the travel story, has historically been shaped in this very beautiful, idyllic kind of way. When people get off the plane or train in their destination, their intention, for the most part, is to have a stress-free, relaxing holiday. And as a result, content creators, to enforce the story, to reinforce this story, we've tended to show places as aesthetically pleasing. We've used that must-see list. We've encouraged people to add things to their bucket list, right? This is the kind of content that we've created in the past. But the real truth is that places are messy. Things are complex. Nothing is as simple as just, the pretty backdrop. And when we only show that comfortable, sanitized, curated perspective, we fail to really lean into the complexity of places. And quite honestly, that is what makes places interesting, right? It's all those layers and all those different intersecting histories and stories that make a place interesting. And yet we failed to really give this 360-degree perspective of the destinations and the people that we encounter in our travel experiences. And when we fail to show that complexity, When we fail to include those messy, uncomfortable stories, we help reinforce what is called the invisible burdens. And this is the very real truth that traveling is very carbon intensive, that tourism has caused gentrification in destinations around the world, that travelers often use natural resources that local people do not have access to. These are the invisible burdens of tourism, and we have chosen to keep them invisible, to suppress them into those dark corners of the spaces that we travel to and the content that we create. And we see this as content creators when, for example, we take pictures of the beautiful food that we're eating, and then we fail to talk about what happens to all that food that is thrown away at the end of that meal. We show pictures of the fantastic pools that we swim in, and we might be swimming in those pools in places where there are serious water shortages. Even here in Gdansk, we heard it yesterday, they're, a beautiful city. We've all had a chance to walk around it and experience this place, but there's a war going on right over the border, and that has definitely impacted life here in Poland. It's changed the societal fabric, it's changed the way people perceive Poland. And so what happens when we only show the pretty picture without acknowledging the complexity of a place? So we need to do a better job of embracing this 360-degree perspective of the places we travel and the experiences we have when we travel. So the first thing I want you to do is start to make the invisible visible. We're starting to see this a little travel content creation with the whole Instagram versus reality kind of thing. I'm loving it. I love that we're starting to show, hey, here's a fantastically beautiful waterfall, and here are all the people that are queuing up to take the same photo. But I want to see more context. What does it mean that all these people are here? Have they all hiked along a trail that is suffering from degradation and erosion because they've had to make this hike? When they've all parked in this parking lot, does that mean that local people in the neighborhood can't drive through this space, that they can't access their own homes? Is there waste management system in place at this destination for when people create garbage? So yes, Instagram versus reality plus context. Let's start giving more context to the content that we're creating and putting out in the world. I also would like to encourage you not only to surface the challenges that a place might be encountering, but also the solutions. We also heard this yesterday in our panel in regard to Central Europe and the impacts of the war. Yes, the reality is that there is a war next door, and Poland has integrated, I believe it was 5 million people into society. There's been a lot of incredible stuff going on here to support people who've had to leave Ukraine. But we don't want to fetishize suffering and trauma. So we want to talk about the challenges, we want to acknowledge them, but I would also encourage you to surface solutions, to highlight the change makers, to empower the local communities and give props where they're due to the social impact initiatives, to the people who are making change, who are, let's empower the local communities that we're visiting, not only by surfacing those challenges, but also those solutions as well. Now, this is a yes and proposition. I'm not suggesting that you lecture your readers and followers. We don't need to do that. Nobody wants to go on holiday and just, be lectured about what they can and cannot do. What I am suggesting is that we can still talk about destinations. We can still encourage people to have incredible travel experiences. They can have great meals. And they can learn a little bit more than we've shared in the past. And as you're learning about this kind of thing as well, as you're learning more about the complexity of the places that you're traveling, I encourage you to bring your readers and followers along on that journey with you. We're all learning. This is a fantastic way to inspire travel, to motivate people to travel. That's what we want to do. And we want to provide a little more than we've done in the past. Now, the tourism industry as a whole is not let off the hook. The tourism industry as a whole needs to make travelers far more aware of their cultural and environmental footprints when they travel. It needs to do a much better job of surfacing those uncomfortable and messy storylines and narratives about the places we go. It needs to do a far, far better job of empowering storytellers who have been historically underrepresented. There's a long way to go in this space for the tourism industry, and you can hold your tourism partners accountable by asking questions, by asking, where is this food from? By asking, what is the narrative that I'm not hearing from you, destination partner? You can ask questions. Questions are your best friend, and we can advocate for change by being aware and being an essential part of this by asking for clarification, by making sure we understand and we let our partners know that we want more information. People want that information. So ask those questions. And as you're traveling, make note of where there's opportunity for improvement. You're staying in a hotel and they're still using single-use plastic water bottles. Offer that feedback when you're home. Let them know, hey, I would really like to promote this place. Would you consider removing the plastic bottles? If you want to know the food origins, let a restaurant know. I'd love to see that in your menus. If you're working with a destination partner, you're doing some research and you're seeing this is the same old storyline. We've all heard about this place. Would you consider, highlighting or surfacing some of those unknown storylines or storytellers? All of these things. When we provide that feedback as people who care and people with influence, we can create change. So that feedback is very powerful. And this should be important to you, not just as a responsible content creator, but as a mindful global citizen of the world. And one of the most important things you can do is to participate in and highlight the kinds of experiences that you want to see and that you want to share with the world yourself as a content creator. You have social and financial currency, and you vote with that by both participating in those activities and promoting those kinds of activities in your work as a content creator. Again, using that influence that you have indicates that you want to challenge the status quo, that you want to see change, and that we need to see change if we're going to change the way that we work in society as a whole. All right, let's talk about the business model. If you're a travel content creator, there's a very good chance that you have participated in press trips, that you've participated in branded partnerships, sponsorships, brand campaigns. All of these kinds of things are, this is very much at the heart of how a lot of travel content creators make money. And there's nothing wrong with any of these things, but what I want to underscore about the travel content creator business model is that people don't know what they don't know. And that means your readers and followers don't always understand how you work. They don't know how you were able to get special access somewhere. They don't understand, why you're participating in certain activities. And the only way to make that clear is to tell them, to be very clear about how you're able to do the things that you do as a travel content creator. So the first thing that you can do here, of course, is be more transparent and identify those things that are sponsorships, that are press trips, those campaigns that you're participating in. Make it clear to your readers and followers how it is that you're able to do these things. Clearly identify that kind of content when you're putting it out in the world. For those of you who are traditional travel journalists or who are going on press trips and then pitching stories to travel publications. We need to talk a little bit about the icky, dirty underbelly of the travel journalism world and the don't ask, don't tell policy. The don't ask, don't tell policy essentially says, if I don't tell my editor that I went on a press trip, or if they don't ask me if I went on a press trip, I don't have to tell them that I went on a press trip. But there are a lot of publications that have policies of some sort that either don't allow writers to go on press trips, or they have some other kind of restrictions. So you can't go on certain kind of things, you can't accept a certain amount of compensated gifts or anything like this. And so what happens is we're working under this very unethical and very opaque model of don't ask, don't tell. Our editors don't know. We're not honest about it. And then what ends up happening then is our editorial staff might be putting out a policy that says, oh yeah, our writers are acting with the greatest integrity. And meanwhile, you're like, well, you know, they didn't ask me about it, so it's okay. And the only way to dismantle this is to not participate in it. Now that doesn't mean don't go on press trips. What that means is that you need to do your due diligence and find out what the rules are. Make sure that you act with the highest levels of integrity and that you are ethical when you go on press trips. So before you leave, I want you to find out what the press trip policy is for any publications that you really want to pitch when you get home. Know before you go so that you are able to act with the highest levels of ethical integrity. And when you return and you pitch, you let editors know, I went on a press trip. It was compensated by these partners. And I can write, you know, with ethical integrity, but I want you to know that this is how I was able to have this experience. There are a lot of editors that are okay with that. We need to just be very clear about this when we're talking specifically about travel journalism. Another thing you can do if you have a blog or if you have some sort of space where you share content in kind of a static space, so maybe it's a link document attached to a link tree in Instagram, maybe it's a caption in YouTube or whatever the case might be, you could publish a disclosures policy. And what this essentially says to anybody who's reading your content is that this is what you can expect from me. This is how I'm going to identify certain kinds of content. This is what I will do. This is what I won't do. This is how I'll let you know if there might be, you know, some conflict of interest. And then there's no question. You've laid it all out on the table. People know what to expect from you. And this isn't just awesome to let people know right up front so that there's no question about how your business model works. But this is a fantastic way to establish trust with your audience. And as you're building your brand, that trust is paramount in helping to drive traffic in order to create a loyal following. So this is not just good practice, this is really good for your brand as well. Now, any of your tourism partners that you're working with should be providing compensated experiences and enter into partnerships with the highest levels of integrity and ethical intention as well. And what that means is they should be ethically sourcing any products or services. They should be embracing diversity and inclusion when they're creating brand campaigns and putting together participant lists for press trips. They should be encouraging complexity, all of those messy bits that we talk about in the tourism space. They should let you have that space to have those difficult conversations, to talk about those complex issues that we were talking about earlier. So your first action here is when you get your next contract or when you get your next itinerary for a press trip, I want you to look at it really hard. And I want you to ask questions. Again, I want you to check for questionable activities. Do they want you to swim with dolphins or bathe elephants? Questionable activity. Do they want you to participate in volunteerism? Questionable activity. I want you to ask about the makeup of the participants. If you're participating in a brand campaign or on a press trip, find out more about the diverse makeup of this crowd. I also want you to ask about whether there's a diversity of storylines that you're going to be able to follow and work with during the campaign. Are there ways for you to access those more non-dominant narratives in a place? These are all things you should be looking for when you're considering a contract or you're considering a press trip. Flag any concerns, and if you're uncomfortable, don't go. Because when you participate and you're not comfortable with the way that a trip or a campaign has been put together, then you are acquiescing. You're saying this is okay. It's okay for you to still be operating in a space that's not ethical. So we need to be flagging those things. We of course know in 2020 that there were a lot of tourism brands that put up their black squares and they said, we are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you're looking at those brand campaigns and those press trips, I also want you to look at any of those DEI commitments and see if what you're seeing in these brand campaigns actually aligns with what your tourism partner has said that they are committed to. You should be looking for things like a wide variety of ages, races, ability. Importantly, we should be seeing more local representation as well when it comes to press trips in particular, and the ability for local people to tell their own story. So ask if there are any local representatives as well. Again, voice any concerns, be an ally, offer recommendations, and if it's appropriate, just say no, okay? No is a very powerful word in showing what you will and will not do and what you do and do not expect the rest of the tourism industry to do as well. Similarly, I want you to look at any carbon action plans, climate action plans, or sustainability commitments. A lot of companies now have roadmaps for reducing their carbon and cutting out waste and plastic and all these things. This is increasingly more visible on websites and things like that. You should be looking at what those plans are and making sure, again, that brand campaigns and that press trips align with what they say they intend to do. So if they're cutting back carbon, I want you to ask if they're offsetting your flights. Have they maximized transportation? Right? Are they walking the walk? Or is it just another performative action? Tourism industry needs to do better here. And you can hold them accountable by doing these things right here. Now I want to come back to the truth that was stated a couple slides ago about this. People who are not familiar with content creation just simply do not know what goes on behind the scenes. And so transparency in this space means that we hold each other accountable, that we are more honest, and that we educate followers along the way. Because when we work with partners who are doing incredible work like this, not only are we able to create amazing content that we share with our followers, but it's far more interesting as well. It moves beyond that two-dimensional, beautiful aesthetic picture on Instagram. And just a shout out to Wonderful here, this bottom photo in the description here. Wonderful, this is from a press trip they just ran in Washington, D.C. Wonderful actually is one of these companies that has stated up front, we are hosting a wide diversity of women and gender diverse folks on these trips. And they make a point of visiting women-owned and BIPOC-owned businesses. And so they're both embracing diversity and surfacing those businesses and those people and those storylines that we haven't heard in tourism before. These are the kinds of partners that you want to be working with, that you want to be supporting, and that you want to encourage your current tourism partners to become. All right, the third thing that we're going to talk about today is your commitment. Your commitment to maximize your positive impact and minimize your negative impact. Because if we are going to create a tourism industry that is more sustainable, that is more inclusive, that is more accessible, then you too are part of this story. And you too need to take action. And so when we hold ourselves accountable, one of the most powerful things we can do as content creators is think to ourselves, what is it that I can do to maximize my positive impact, minimize my negative impact? And it can be a large range of things. It might be sustainability goal. I am only going to eat meat 1 day a week. It might be climate action goal. I'm only going to fly 8 times this year. It might be a social impact goal. I will only stay at locally owned businesses. Now, whatever it is you intend to do to be a more responsible and intentional person working in the tourism industry, I'd like to encourage you to state that out loud. To let your followers know. Because when it lives in our head, it's really easy to move the goalpost. But when we put it out in the world, we become accountable to each other, we become accountable to our readers and followers, and importantly, we become accountable to ourselves. And when we become accountable to ourselves, it gives us reason to show up and act. It's a motivator. And so your action here is that you're going to create these goals. You're going to decide what it is you are going to do to be a more responsible and intentional travel content creator. And you're going to put it out in the world. You're going to share it with your readers and your followers. Ideally, it's a measurable goal, something that you can quantify. And again, part of the reason for this is because then we actually have something to work toward. You can count whether it happened or it didn't happen. And then we're going to update our readers and followers at an appropriate interval. Generally, once a year is a good goal for that. It gives you long enough time to actually work toward the goal. But 5 years, it's easy to forget about it. So I would suggest that you're updating probably once a year. So make the goal, make it measurable, and update your progress. I put here that you can become a signatory of the Future of Tourism Coalition. This is an industry group that has 13 guiding principles that have been laid out and how the tourism industry is going to move into the new era of tourism, so to say. This industry group, it's open to content creators, and yet there are very few content creators in part of this conversation. The power of a group like this is showing up and being held accountable for your actions, what you said you will or will not do. So, beyond becoming a signatory of the Future of Tourism Coalition, the more important thing here is that you find people, your colleagues, the people in this room who can hold you accountable and who you can go to when you need support, when you need resources, when you need help, to help move toward that goalpost. Again, we can be accountable to ourselves, but it can be really powerful to have a community behind us. Again, I come back to wonderful. There's a great community space where people could come together on a quarterly basis and say, hey, these are the goals I'm working on to become more socially aware. Does anybody have any resources on this? Who's struggling with this? How did you deal with that? So this is what Future Tourism Coalition is great. The bigger picture here, though, is find the group of people who can support you on your journey in this space. And when it comes to letting your followers know how it goes, one of your options would be to publish what I would call an impact report. It sounds kind of stiff and formal, but my intention here is for you to revisit those goals. For you to say, this was my goal, I measured it, this is how I did, this is why I did or didn't meet that goal. Here's what I intend to do in the future. It's an opportunity for you to reflect on the journey, for you to think about how you want to move forward. And the thing is that, it can look kind of formal. It might be a blog post, it might be a page on your website. You're all very, very creative. This can take any form. Maybe it's an Instagram Live. Maybe it's, it's something on a TikTok video, or, whatever. You choose the format for this. You know where your readers and followers are. You know what resonates with them. Use your voice. Use your platform. Again, this is about just being accountable for what your actions are in the tourism industry. And again, we come back to, what do we expect our tourism partners to do? The good news is that conscious consumers, not just in the tourism industry, but across all industries in society, are starting to force brands' hands. They want to support brands that stand for something, that are more than just a logo, that have intention behind their actions, that have thought carefully about who is impacted by the work that they do in this world. And so accountability in this space, first of all, is to look at what your tourism partners say they are going to do, or say what they intend to do. And you're looking for things like carbon reduction plans, DEI commitments, corporate social responsibility policies, such as animal welfare policies. These things should be, for the most part, publicly available. And if you can't find them, what can you do? Ask. That's your right, not only as a responsible content creator, but also as a conscious consumer. So you're looking for these kinds of things from your partners that you're working with. Another thing that you can look for to see if your tourism partners are, in fact, as transparent as they say they are, is to look for some sort of certification that they've gone through. This essentially is their way of saying, we believe we have made a positive impact in some way, and we're willing to let an unaffiliated third party take a look at everything we've done and decide if we actually have done what we've said we've done. And there are some certifications that are kind of bogus, but there's some really good stuff out there. A B Corps certification is a certification that's cross-industry, extremely rigorous, that is a very deep dive into all the corporate and social and environmental policies a company has. And you can find out if your company, that your tourism partner, is in fact B Corps certified. And if they are, that says that they are opening their books, they're letting the world see how they do business, and they intend to do good in this world. Another thing you're going to start seeing in the tourism industry is the Glasgow Declaration on Climate Action is something that was signed last year, COP26, and that happened in November of last year. And the first wave of signatories on this tourism policy are due to deliver their climate action plans in November of this year. And for companies that have signed on to the Glasgow Declaration, they're going to be rolling out their measurable climate action plans in the months to come. And so you can ask your tourism partners if they've signed on to the Glasgow Declaration. It's another great thing to look for. I also highly recommend taking a look at the Black Travel Scorecard, which was created by the Black Travel Alliance, which is a super deep dive into a lot of travel brands and how they have stood up against the DEI commitments that they've made since 2020. So it's another great place to check to see if your tourism partners are actually walking the walk when it comes to public impact and environmental and cultural responsibility. One quick word about certification. I will say that some of these do cost money to go through this. I mean, it does cost money to bring in a third party. So some small and medium enterprises might not be able to afford these things. So don't discount your tourism partner if they don't have any of these big certifications. But you can always encourage them to start going through this process, and you can, There's just one other thing that you can look for in deciding if this is a company you want to work with. And of course, don't hesitate to ask. Again, as a creator, as a consumer, as a mindful global citizen of the world, if your brand and your tourism partner doesn't know the answer, is not willing to give you information, it is a red flag. So I want you to amplify and support those that are actually walking the talk. And again, that's not just about making sure the entire tourism industry is held accountable for their actions, but when you align your brand with a brand that is engaging in problematic behaviors, that also reflects upon you. And so again, we come back to this idea that this is good business sense, that we are all holding each other accountable in this way. Now, as we finish up here, I want to leave you with a few closing thoughts. I started out this presentation telling you today that the tourism industry is going through a major transition right now. We're going through a huge transition in society as a whole. There are a lot of big intersecting issues coming together at the moment, and we need some very, very deep systemic changes, not only in society, but in the tourism industry as a whole. To make big changes is going to require time. It cannot happen overnight. It is a journey. And as we go along this journey, I want you to remember that we're all in different places. We're all in different spots with our learning. We're going to have to unlearn. We're going to have to relearn. We're going to make mistakes. We don't always have the answers. But if we're going to be honest about it, we need to own up to the fact that sometimes we do make a mistake. Sometimes, yeah, we've made a misstep. And I'm going to commit to being better. I'm going to commit to doing better. I'm going to learn a little bit, and we're going to move on. Now, knowing that we're all in different places, and that not every company, not every brand, not every content creator is, right at the front lines of all of this, I would encourage us to avoid shaming each other. Guilt tripping does not help anybody. And I know that cancel culture is all the rage right now, but I would encourage us, if it is appropriate, to call in rather than call out. And I want to be really clear here. When we see something like the Boohoo fashion brand partnering with a Kardashian and naming them a sustainability ambassador, we need to say something, right? Like, that is not okay. It's very clear greenwashing. But when we see somebody on the journey that's doing their very best, but maybe needs a little guidance, that maybe needs some resources, I want us to have those hard conversations. I want us to offer the resources that we have. And the truth is, there are a lot of really fantastic free resources that have been developed by some of those companies that are a little further ahead and that are free to use and that we can share with the tourism partners we're working with to help them along and move there a little bit faster. So let's engage in those conversations and let's encourage better behavior together, because we need to start making it clear why it is important to us as responsible content creators, as conscious consumers, as travelers, and again, as mindful global citizens in this world. Because when we hold each other and ourselves accountable, and we're really willing to embrace this scary but brutally honest, radical transparency, rather than avoiding it, together we can actually create a tourism ecosystem that is safer, that is more accessible, that is more sustainable, that is more inclusive, that is more culturally and environmentally aware together. Thank you so much. I am excited to chat with you a little bit more. I think we have some time for questions, yeah? All right, thanks.
Thank you. There we go. Thank you so much, JoAnna. That was amazing. JoAnna has this way of just like getting right to the punch. So I really appreciate you bringing all of this up. I have so much to reflect on and think about, and I want all of you to take, we do have time for questions. So if you have a question that you'd like to bring up, go ahead and raise your hand. Or a reflection on, yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious about your thoughts on human trafficking and how this relates to that.
Yeah, so there are actually policies, this would be considered corporate social responsibility policy that a lot of tourism brands have either created or not created, but should be creating. If you're working with hotels or airlines in particular, they should have a policy in place when it comes to human trafficking. There are guidelines in place on what that might look like, and there are organizations actually in tourism that work specifically on that issue. So if you're working with a brand where this might be, part of what is happening where you're visiting, you can ask about that. What are they doing? Are they funding any on-the-ground organizations that are assisting in these things? What are their policies to ensure that people who are in these hotels or on these airlines are safe? So you absolutely can ask any sort of brand partner what their policies are on this. Yeah.
Other questions? Come on, guys.
I'm wondering if we should disclose our trip here with WITS. We did all these amazing tours. Is that something we need to disclose?
If you were hosted, then it's good practice. Yeah, just let your followers know I was a guest on one of these tours, or this tour company hosted me as a guest to do this food tour, whatever the case might be. Yeah, and that could be something that you talk about in a disclosure policy, and you let folks know what that might look like. You might include it at the bottom of a blog post. You might mark it as sponsored or ad or whatever the case might be on Instagram or something like that. Basically, if you didn't pay your way, if you could in any way be considered having a conflict of interest in the way that you are presenting the experience, it's good practice to disclose. Yeah. And in some places, legally you're supposed to, but this has not been reinforced the way that it was intended to be reinforced.
Hi, I was wondering if there was something collectively like a blogger or content creator statement that we could all sign up to say, yes, as a blogger I commit to doing all of these things. Does that exist that you know of? Does anyone create that? Guidelines and stuff?
I think there are, so if you're a member of certain organizations or associations, a lot of groups have some sort of ethical policy or integrity policies. So for example, if you're a member of, I was a member of the Society of Environmental Journalists for a while, right? And there's a whole policy where if you're going to be a member of that, you need to follow these journalistic policies. So there are most groups, most associations, and maybe even Wonderful, has some sort of as a member of this group, you agree to, act with integrity, you agree to these kinds of policies. Now, when it comes specifically to this kind of thing, I don't know that there's kind of a blanket statement that content creators can sign. Certainly there are examples of ways that you can disclose this stuff in your own content, but the closest thing that I am aware of would be the tourism industry at large, which would be something like the Future of Tourism Coalition, which has the 13 guiding principles. And by signing into that, you say, as a member of the tourism industry, I conduct my work in highest integrity, moving toward these 13 guiding principles. So something like that would be a possibility. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And sorry, I just want to say one other thing that's come up over the last few days, and I see this a lot in the tourism industry, is people say to me, for example, yes, but my editor, doesn't act with integrity, or yes, but my tourism partner, says that this isn't what travelers want, and then it goes deeper and deeper, like, yes, but the funding model, just holds up this system, so what can we do about that? And it goes deep, 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 and that's why I say we need systemic changes, because there's always going to be a yes, but response to any of this. And my response to all these people who say, but I'm coming up against these boundaries, I can't uphold these things because of this partner, the person above me, or whatever the case might be. And my response to that is, as long as we keep saying yes, then we keep showing that this is the way we expect the tourism industry to be and to act, and that this is okay with us. But as individuals and as a collective of responsible content creators, you are influential. Your voice matters, the actions you take matter. And when enough people demand change, that's when change happens. And so I know that the idea of saying no to some campaigns is very scary. I know that the idea of saying, well, I don't feel comfortable, following the guidelines of this publication because I really want to write for them, but we have to say no. No is a very powerful word, and if we can't find those relationships and the ability to stand up for what is right, we can never fix what is wrong. So.
It's such a tough one because there's also like the whole money problem. There's a bit of privilege involved in being able to like pick and choose projects based on whether they align with your environmental ideas and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious. I know I struggle. It's just rough.
It is rough.
Like sometimes you're like, I kind of need this gig to like feed my kids. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's hard to keep things just totally in line with your higher ethics, because one of the games that I play is I'll like do things and then I underhandedly critique it from the inside, which is a way, I'm just wondering if there's any nuance to the like just say no, absolutely not, refuse.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There is nuance. There are situations where, we need the paycheck. Maybe not everything aligns, but if we have some options and we can choose the lesser of the evils, for example, or if we can, we're working with a tourism partner that doesn't completely align with us, but that is open to conversation and how this can be better in the future. I think the difficult part is when we're sometimes, we just, in our heart of hearts, we're like, okay, this feels icky, up, down, sideways, and there's no negotiating. If we have the ability to say no, that's our place to say no. And I understand that it comes from a place of privilege. Not everybody can do that. But if those of us who can do that, or we can choose the lesser of the evil, work with tourism partners who are open to hearing these things, that's where the power comes in. Because we, at the end of the day, when we're more transparent about the work that we do, we not only have the opportunity to create better content for our readers and followers, but we also encourage them to have better travel experiences, to be better stewards of the environment and more culturally aware when they're traveling. So this is actually a win-win-win scenario. And it's not perfect, and we're all on a journey getting there. But it's first step, there are options on how we can get to that place. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit
more about the invisible burdens.
Yeah.
There's so many nuances to that because I think on one hand you can show the good, on the other hand you can show the bad. So for example, Claire and I write about food, and in Vietnam, at the local stalls, you know, a lot of people just eat and sometimes they throw stuff on the floor. So do you show the little stall that's specializing in the cuisine and that's all they do and it's amazing and it's great? Or do you talk about the negative where it's, for Western perspective, it may not be the best place to eat from their just hygiene standards? So it's like when you talk about the invisible burdens, do you focus on what's wrong versus, because sometimes tourism can be a force for good. It can bring in the dollars and improve the current situation. So I'm curious in your point of view.
Yeah, so actually there's a fantastic book that was an ebook, a report put out by the Travel Foundation and Epler Wood Consultancy in 2019, and it goes into the invisible burdens. It's actually one of the resources I share the most with folks in the tourism industry. If you look it up, it's a really fantastic resource that goes into the complexity of the invisible burdens of tourism. When it comes to sharing content, like I said before, it's not we still want to encourage people to travel. We still want people to visit destinations. We want them to have amazing experiences. But we want them to do that with more context and a little more information so that they can use that information as well as all the other information that they gather to help make the travel decisions that create the appropriate expectations for the places they're traveling, the experiences they're going to have, and the people they're going to encounter when they're there. So, and the reason why this is important is because it is common in a lot of places around the world to show the beautiful bits, and then travelers show up and they're shocked by maybe how much garbage there is, or by how many people are homeless in the area, or whatever the case might be. And that's only because we haven't shared that information before. And so we can still talk about these incredible food stalls. We can still share that reality. That is a reality. And there's more to that story. So like the example I showed with the e-bike, and how it allowed this particular content creator to experience Switzerland in a really new and interesting way, you know, also it's important to realize that the batteries of e-bikes are resource intensive. So in your caption, perhaps you talk a little bit about, you know, maybe the standards aren't up to what the average Western traveler might expect, or whatever, you know, whatever the case might be. Because what's happening right now is the way that we've created content and we put it out into the world, we have developed an expectation by travelers that when they show up, they can do what they want, they can get whatever it is they desire, and it's a very traveler-centric experience. And we're trying to turn that so it's about the communities that we go to and the people who are there. It's not about the traveler. They get to enjoy that, but they are a visitor in somebody's home. And the reality of being a visitor in somebody's home is that, take it or leave it, it's all of this. It's not just this one beautiful image that you believe you're going to encounter when you show up somewhere. So the invisible burdens are, I mean, they are plentiful. And I think that we can talk about them a little more in our content. We don't have to just post photos of garbage or whatever the case might be. It's about providing more context, the challenges and the solutions, the beautiful bits and the messy bits, right? It's that 360-degree perspective. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to add a bit to what was said there. How do you do that without fetishizing suffering? Because I understand adding nuance and I understand adding context, but I'm just going to give an example. So I was in India a few years ago with a friend, and you know, we posted pictures of our food, and then she wanted to caption something to do with poverty and suffering and how she's so lucky to be able to eat this food when there is loads of poverty and people can't, you know, afford food. And I was like, well, you wouldn't go to London post a picture of a croissant or whatever and talk about food poverty in the UK. So why are you doing it in India? And she said something like raising awareness and how she has to add context. And I remember thinking, no, this is poverty porn, right? Like you're fetishizing the suffering here because we have food poverty in the UK. So I'm just trying to wonder how we would do that and talk about the invisible burdens without the Western, patronizing perspective.
Yeah, and that's a really great question. And there's something called asset framing and deficiency framing. And essentially, asset framing is showing like the positive side of something versus deficiency framing would be like the suffering and they're those poor people. So there is a way to talk about the invisible framing in a way that is also empowering to the people who might be going hungry or whatever the case might be. So we have an opportunity, we don't want anybody to be we don't want to exploit anybody or extract anybody's story or in creating our content. That should never be that is not our right. It's not what we want to do. We don't want to exploit people. We don't want to commodify their cultures. However, what we can do is when we tell these stories, we can tell them in a way that are empowering to the people that they are about. And there are a lot of things that go into that. There's about understanding the power dynamics at play. It's about getting permission for the stories that we share with other people, being aware of the photos that we're taking and that we are sharing. And in a case like this, I think there is an opportunity to talk about the power and the empowerment behind these people that you might be encountering. Did you say you went to India? What is the strength? What is the power behind them versus painting them as victims, as the people who are suffering? So we want to empower people. We can frame our narrative so it is an asset for them versus deficiency. So there is some stuff about asset framing, deficiency framing there that you can do. And we see that a lot in when we talk about or when people who have been historically underrepresented are the ones that we're supposed to be like celebrating and supporting. I think there is a lot of power right there to let those people tell their story, to let whoever that person or that community might be, to frame that story. What do they want to share with the world? And so we can use asset framing, deficiency framing in a way that is more empowering in those kinds of instances. Yeah.
So this brings up another question. To what degree should we share the good and the bad of the country? And again, probably by the example would be the best. My niche is luxury travel mostly and unique experiences. I spent a month in Morocco and showing the best hotels and riads and very unique experiences, which I understand is not the average traveler's experience. However, because of things I had to say about Morocco, which was mostly good because that was my particular experience, I have not only had people really taking well to the posts and really liking them, but at the same time, Moroccans thanking me for portraying their country the way I did. So considering my niche is more luxury, I find that even though I like to talk about both the good and the bad, a lot of my clientele or my followers do not want to see a lot of poverty or ugly shots and things like that. At the same time, I feel that Moroccans have been extremely grateful for the way I portrayed their country, to the point where not only 15% of my followers are now Moroccans, but I have gotten hundreds and hundreds of direct messages thanking me for the way I see their country and telling me that that's the way it should be portrayed. So where do you find the balance, especially if your niche is that higher end, to show maybe the inequality or the poverty or things like that?
Yeah,
to be real.
Yeah. So I think there are two things there, and one is understanding what is objective and subjective.
is not the end of these conversations, but I hope the beginning of these conversations, whether we continue them online, whether we have these dialogues with potential partners, with collaborators, whether we're bringing them up at future events like WITS. I mean, I hope that we continue to hold